This video is about modifications to the MySQL configuration file, which is called my.cnf. I add collation server equals UTF-8 Unicode CI and character set server equals UTF-8. All right, I'm in the etc MySQL directory of the production server, and I can see that this version of MySQL D, the MySQL Diamond, which is version 5.7 for Ubuntu 16, is a bit more complicated than the previous versions of MySQL D, in other words, MySQL Daemon. Apparently, MySQL Diamond is configured to load any .cnf file. In other words, any MySQL D configuration file from the etc MySQL directory. So it loads this one, it loads this one, it loads this one, and it loads all the ones in this subdirectory. Okay? However, my custom configuration is in this one. So that's what I'm going to look at. Okay, nano my.cnf. Okay. They even tell me that it says this file has been automatically moved from your previous etc MySQL myconf with just this comment added at the top to maintain MySQL operation using your previous customized configuration. You can see that the MySQL Diamond runs on port 3306. Here you can see the changes I had made previously. Okay, the bind address is the IP address of the server. Here's the changes I had made, which I pointed to earlier. Okay, but let's talk more about this one. By commenting out the bind address equals quadruple 0 and making it bind address is the IP address of the machine, what I'm doing is allowing the MySQL daemon to listen in on the network card of the machine. So that makes the database available on the internet. And I do this so that I can access the database from MySQL Workbench or some other app at home on my Macintosh. Here you can see the specified MySQL error.log file. And these two lines over here were modifications which I made based on a lynda.com course, which had said that these modifications had to be made because there was an error in the default MySQL Diamond configuration file, my.cnf. Also, the line long query time equals 2 that had been commented in the original, but I make it uncommented. Then there's some funny business about key buffer versus key buffer size. I believe the original defective configuration file used the term key underscore buffer, and I had to change it to key underscore buffer size in 2 different places. So I'm gonna scroll down because I need to find the other one. Okay, there's key buffer size here. I'm gonna make the search for key buffer size. All right. So we have one here. Let's do the search again. And we have one here. Okay, so there's 2 of them. And after making changes to my.cnf, you need to do service MySQL restart. Okay? All right. I'm going to just overdub the earlier video about this subject, which is this one. And then I'm going to edit it a little bit. This is the older video, which covers the topic of configuring MySQL on a production server in order for MySQL Workbench to be able to connect to it as root. This is MySQL Workbench right here. And this is the connection I was able to make about a year ago to my production MySQL server. In my case, I actually changed it to the IP address of the server. And the bind address is basically the network card or the IP address of the network card on the server on which MySQL Diamond will listen for a connection. The reason that they had this bind address setting is that if they set it to the loopback IP, then MySQL Daemon would automatically reject any connections from outside of the machine. And that was like a security measure. So if you set it to a quadruple 0, it listens to any network card on the machine. If you specify the IP address of the machine or the network card on the machine, then it listens to that specific network card with that IP address. A machine can have more than one network card, so it can have more than one IP address. I logged into the production server, and then I issued this command to log into the MySQL server. And the word MySQL here means that as soon as I'm logged into the MySQL server, I want the default database to be the one that's called MySQL. What we are attempting to do here is we are going to enter a new record in the user table of the MySQL database. And please do not be confused when I say the MySQL database. There's actually a database called MySQL in the database management system, which is overall called MySQL. And what we are trying to do, there are several records in that user table which all list the name root. So supposedly each record is for root. Each of these multiple records for root. However, each of those has a different address, and this is partially an IP address, partially a name. And I'll show you what it looks like. That way, the database will allow root to log in from that location. Here what you are seeing is after we've entered that command to log in as root. This vimrc page, it has really good notes for SQL commands. If you want to display the user table of the database called MySQL, then this is a very useful command right here on the screen. The reason you wouldn't just show the whole table is because that table has a lot of columns. It only shows these columns of the user table, and it'll show the entire user table. By entire, I mean all the records. The goal is to have the table look like this, where it would have a row for root, which lists the host as the address of my home computer. So the big question is, what is the MySQL command which added this row to the user table? The third step was to get this table to look the way it looks like right now. See, there is more than one record in this table for the root user because the root user can log in from different hosts. This host right here at the top, that's the most important one because that corresponds to my house, which is where MySQL Workbench is connecting from. Now, the other important point to note here is the command that you use to add users or add rows to this table. You don't just simply add those rows. You have to use some specific command for adding users to the MySQL database. Those commands are specified right here. These are the relevant commands. First, you would create the user, and of course we're not creating another root, but we're creating another root at the specific hosts over here. And when you add that other user, you also give additional fields their values, like grant privileges, show database privileges, all those other ones. So that's the first step, is to create the user. So the first one creates the user. The second one grants all privileges to the user. And you would replace the username with root, and instead of localhost, you would use whichever host that you want to add as a table record. Actually, before you flush privileges, you're going to really need to look at this table that I have right here, because there's going to be a few columns that don't look right. Like they might have an N here and you want it to have a Y. Well, you can use the update command, which is this one over here, to update whichever columns don't look right for you. And then the last step is you flush privileges. Remember I showed you that these are the databases we have. They include a database called MySQL. And note the other databases. Now when I connect from MySQL Workbench, and I'm going to do that right now, for some reason I only get 3 databases to show up, whereas I have 4 databases on the database server. This is the particular database that for some reason does not show up over here. I may have to check and look at all the other fields here for these users with these host names and see where there are some N's where there should be Y's. And then I will have to use the update command to update those fields for those records. All right, that's it for this topic.